All right. Well, thank you all for joining. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna share my screen. Let's see here. All right, so you guys should see my screen at this point. If you don't, just give me a shout real quick and I'll get that all straightened out. Hi, my name is Joseph Worthy. I am a certified master inspector based right here in Phoenix, Arizona with Premier Inspector Group. Tonight, what we're going to, or this afternoon, depending on where you're at, what we're going to cover is the basics of inspecting the photovoltaic system, or also the PV system. It's also known as a solar array or a solar system. Um, I've been inspecting in the inspection industry for a few years now, and in that time, I've seen solar really go from a very rare uh, piece of equipment that's attached to the top of a house, very rudimentary, to something that has blown up into some just the big arrays. They're powering entire homes. You see arrays that look like they can power multiple homes. They're becoming super popular out here in Arizona. We're going to talk about how popular here in just a little bit, but you'll find them in almost every new subdivision now, especially here in Arizona. This hour is not going to be about making you a code inspector or a solar panel installer or anything like that. It's basically to give you the understanding of the components, the red flags, and the limitations. What you really need to know as a home inspector to protect yourself, protect your client, and really to add more value to your inspections, because that's something we're always looking to do. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna break this down into manageable sections that we're gonna walk through. We're going to go through everything from the basics of solar energy concepts. And again, we're going to keep it pretty rudimentary. We're going to talk about some specific components that you're going to encounter in the field, like the inverters, the disconnects, the wiring, even some things that you'll want to look for up in an attic. We're also going to cover the labeling, which is a pretty big safety point. We're going to talk about safety issues, common installation defects, and how to document everything clearly in your report. We want to make sure that we stay out of the lane of the contractor territory. We're going to stick pretty much to what an inspector needs to look at, so we don't cross into somebody else's IP. This isn't going to be about memorizing codes or anything like that. This is just to get you guys to understand what matters for safety, liability, and to add that value to your inspection. So let's talk about the solar, how solar works, and the basic parts of it. So down to its basic nuts and bolts, it starts with the solar cell. It's a 4x4 square in a solar panel. It's the smallest unit. It's what actually captures the sun's rays and converts it into electricity. And it's done through a mineral called silicon, not silicone. That's used for something else. Silicon is mined and it's turned into these solar cells. All of those cells are then put into what's known as a panel or a module. They are soldered together. They're put into a frame. There's a piece of glass that goes over the top of it, and that's what creates your solar panel. Each solar panel can generate approximately 350 to 450 watts. Those solar panels can be used as one, or you can use them in what's known as an array, a solar array. That's a collection of the solar panels that will generate either just your AC unit for your home, or it's going to generate power for your entire home. Some people have systems that are so big that it puts power back to the grid and they get a credit. So that's the basics of what your solar array is. It's one cell put into a solar panel, which is then put into a solar array, and they're all connected to the next part. So let's talk about how this actually will operate. So the solar process in plain terms, we're going to break it down in plain terms because if you understand how it's all coming in and comes together, it actually will help you guide yourself through that inspection and guide your client through it It's not a real complex system. Again, it's pretty rudimentary. Sun goes in, electricity comes out. That's pretty much what it is. But first things first, the system starts by harnessing sunlight. It turns that sunlight into DC current or DC electricity, which is direct current. That direct current is basically useless when it comes in. Your house does not run off of DC electricity. So we have to we have to turn it into AC current so your home cannot actually use it. The way it's done is the sunlight comes in, it creates DC current. It then moves from the solar panels down the raceway to your inverter. Your inverters are what turns your DC current into AC current by just basically turning it on and off. It alternates at about a bazillion times per second to create that alternating current. That is what's going to run your appliances, your lights, your AC unit, or whatever else you have hooked up to it. From that inverter, it then has to go out to your home to be used. So if you are pulling a charge from your home because you're running your TV, the dishwasher, your washing machine, and your AC, you're going to pull a charge from your unit or from your service panel. So your solar panel is sending your power down to the inverter, from the inverter to your service panel, and then from your service panel, it goes into your house and powers it. If you're not using power, that power has to go somewhere from the inverter. So instead of going to the service panel to be used, it will actually go back out to the grid to be turned into a credit. That's where you hear people saying, hey, I had a $40 credit on my electrical bill last month. I don't ever pay anything. That's why. They're using less power than what they generate, and it goes back out to the grid. That's the benefit of solar. Now, there's a whole lot of it's not worth it because you have to replace it in 20 years because that's as long as a solar panel is useful for. But some people find it useful, and that's how they live off the grid. They want to do that. You don't need to memorize any type of electrical flow or anything like that, but just the basic understanding of how it goes from the panel into the house or back out to the grid will help guide your client through the understanding as you explain what's going on with their solar array if there is something going on. So today, the numbers that we have from the Department of Energy show that in 2024, about 4.2 million homes with rooftop solar panels existed in the United States. That's about 5% of all homes, single-family homes in the country. You know, 5% doesn't seem like a whole lot, but if you look back just 10 or even 20 years ago, that was only 1 to 2%. So that's considered pretty rapid growth. And it's only going to accelerate as utility prices get more expensive, especially here in Arizona, as the incentives increase from solar providers. Homeowners are going to want to go solar. Now, I know the federal government has had a lot of incentives for people to go solar. It is my understanding that some of those are going to go away, but that just means that people aren't going to be buying it. They're going to be leasing it instead, which is fine. It's still going to put a demand for home inspectors to know more about the solar array. Here in Arizona, the numbers are actually much higher as far as percentages go, especially in these new developments where some manufacturers of homes are actually including solar arrays into their packages. So you can actually have it built into your mortgage. It's part of the home. So with that, there's going to be a growing expectation from our agents that we work with and from our clients that hire us that we're at least going to be able to go up on the roof and look at that solar array and let them know if something looks out of the ordinary. Again, we don't need to talk about the code portion of it or the actual setup of it, but we need to be able to talk to them about what looks right. So what's going to be our role in this? So InterNACHI, ASHI, your state boards, all of them disclaim solar equipment. meaning we are not required to inspect them. But that's the opportunity. Just because it's not required doesn't mean there isn't a growing expectation that our agents and our clients are going to have, that we at least look at it and call out anything that's obviously wrong. We already do that with a lot of the things that we look at when we do a home inspection. So the solar equipment on the roof isn't going to be much different. And being able to spot what is not correct or looks out of the ordinary, that's going to set you apart as a home inspector. Those that decide that they want to just, follow that black and white standard and not go down that road, it actually puts them at a disadvantage as solar becomes more popular. I know here in Arizona, we get asked quite a bit, hey, can you look at the solar? So we have actually went through a lot of training so we can do just that. We're seeing more homes with solar arrays, and with that comes a higher demand on us as inspectors to at least explain what it looks like, whether it looks professionally done or not, what it looks like it's good and what isn't good. We're not acting as licensed electricians, just like we wouldn't for the electrical system. And we're not acting as solar contractors, just like we wouldn't for any other. All we're doing is we're not diagnosing, we're just applying our current standards that we have based on the state or InterNACHI or ASHI, noting type and condition, the recommendation, and sometimes an implication. Always, if we find something going on with it, we're going to recommend a further evaluation by a licensed either electrician or solar contractor. That's our role. So let's actually talk about now the solar array and what we might be seeing when we're looking at it. First off, you're going to have two different types of mounting systems. For commercial buildings, if you're doing a commercial inspection, or if you're on a Santa Fe style home where it's got a flat roof or a portion of the roof is flat, like a patio cover, which we'll talk about why that's a bad idea here shortly. You're going to see something called a tilted array. Now, your tilted array is actually a very highly efficient system, because you actually can tilt your solar array to the ideal angle for the spring and the fall. That's the time when the sun hits that same angle the most. Your winter and summer, those are going to be your outliers. So you're not really going to focus too much on those. You want the preponderance of the angle of the sun, spring and fall. So with the tilt system, you can actually do that. I know in the Northeast where I was, they didn't put solar arrays on roofs as much as they did out in the yard, because they could do big clearings and they could do tilted arrays, and they would actually do arrays that would move with the seasons, because in the Northeast you get some pretty bad angles. So tilted arrays are actually very efficient. What you want to look for on a tilted array when it's on the roof is it ballasted properly, and is it mounted properly? Because sometimes they're just ballasted where you have just a lot of weight sitting on the anchor point. They're not actually bolted into the roof, or they might be hard anchored into the roof. So you got to make sure your penetrations are good. You're using your curb flashing up there. The other type is going to be your pitched array. So your pitched array is one that just follows the angle of the roof. So if you have a steep angle of your roof, your solar array is going to be steep. If it's a lower angle, it's going to be a lower angle for your solar array. It just kind of slopes with the roof. The panels are mounted right to the roof, usually following the angle of the slope. You want to look there at the penetrations to make sure they're properly sealed and flashed, just like you would anything else for any type of roof inspection. If not, you're going to find leaks. You want to take a step back and look at how the panel sits. You want to make sure that they're evenly spaced, that you have gaps between the panels for expansion and contraction. You want to make sure that they're not crooked, that they're not offset, that they're not elevation deviation in the two. Noticing those types of situations or issues might have an implication as to whether it was or was not installed professionally or by a good installer. So if you're seeing them that they're warped or there's different elevations in them, you're seeing that there's no gaps in them, that can create other issues, which would be like warping of the frame, racking. Those are other concerns that we have to kind of watch for. Again, the pitched roof is what you're going to find the most. So with all of those things that you can see there, with the exception of the flat roof, you can actually see the majority of that stuff from the ground. I know that here in Arizona, we are not required to walk on a roof to inspect it. So that kind of puts some people at the disadvantage of inspecting a solar array. For those inspectors that will not walk roofs or don't walk roofs, they're going to be limited to what they can see from the ground. So hope you have a good set of binoculars and maybe stand in the back of your truck. But that's the easiest way to do it. Is, if you're not going to climb the roof, step back. You can have a drone, you can use binoculars, you can use a camera on a pole. The best way, though, is to walk the roof. So let's look at our design considerations. So for the design considerations, when we go up on the roof, if that's where you're going, the first thing you want to do is you want to just look at the actual design. Look at where it's placed. You're not looking at just whether it's bolted down and flashed. You want to evaluate whether it makes sense. If you're looking at the solar array and it's kind of sparse here and there and placed all around, and it doesn't make good sense, you're going to want to note that. And you're basically what you're looking for is you're looking for the orientation and the tilt. The orientation needs, I know especially for here in Arizona, we want the panels to be on the south and the west side of the house. You will find them on the east side, the southeast, south, and southwest. You want to try and keep everything away from the north side because the angle, the angle on the north is going to come down this way. The sun is coming in this way, and it's not going to hit this side. So you want to look at the layout. Does it make sense? If all of your panels are over on the north side, that's not going to make a lot of sense. That's going to be a call out for you. You want to look at the ventilation of the system, not the vents coming through the roof just yet. We'll talk about that in a second, but the ventilation of the array. So you don't, on a flat roof, you don't want it laying down flat. That would not be a good angle anyway. On a pitched roof, you don't want it laying right directly on the tiles or the shingles. You got to have a gap, and it's usually about a 2 to 3 inch gap. That allows airflow to get underneath. These things are going to generate heat. That's why pigeons like to go underneath them. You want to make sure that they're not flush, that they're allowing airflow to go through, that way you don't lose any, they don't overheat and lose efficiency. There should be enough air under there to breathe, especially during the summer when the shingles, you can actually fry eggs on them. You're going to look for any type of shading that might be around. And shading is not just trees or some shrubs that might, grow really tall. You want to look for chimneys. You want to look for parapet walls, obviously trees. Where I live on the side of a mountain, down at the base of it. So it really doesn't benefit me to have solar on my roof because I lose about 3 hours of sunlight every day. Look at that because that's a limitation. I've had solar companies come out here and want to put solar on and they realize the mountains are like, nah, never mind. It won't benefit me. So you want to look at the issues for shading. That goes to the flat patio roof. We just recently inspected a home that had solar, and they put the solar panels on the patio, the flat patio, which was pretty cool. It kept it off the roof, but for a large portion of the day, the house actually cast the shadow on the panels. So it didn't make sense. So you want to make sure that you're calling out issues like that don't make sense. You want to check for panel consistency if you can. So when you look at the sides of the panels, a lot of times they'll have labels on them that are visible. If you're looking at those and they have labels on them and they're not consistent with each other, they're mixing brands, that's definitely a call out. You got to make sure this isn't like an electrical panel where some people can, or sometimes you can get away with, a Cutler hammer with a Westinghouse or something like that. You need to keep these consistent with each other. So if you have XYZ panel here, XYZ panel should be here. That way, you know that they're going to be able to talk with each other. You're not going to cause any issues. You want to look for any patchwork, framing, temporary points of poor planning, leftover parts, or anything like that. That can be a sign of poor craftsmanship or an unprofessional install. Sorry, is it our job to suggest how many panels a house should have? So we can cover that in this one. No, it is not our job. And the reason why is because that's very specific to what the original setup was. The majority of the time that we're going to these homes to do these inspections, it's because it's a part of a sale process. The panels already existed on the house. Very rarely do we get called out to do strictly a solar inspection. Not that it couldn't happen, but it's very rare. It's usually part of a sale. The panels already existed. So there is a guideline that you can go by. You can always Google it. I didn't cover it in this because it's not something that we do. It goes really outside of our scope. But there are guidelines. There's general rules of thumb. But we don't dive into that because we don't know what the house was originally set up for. They may have put 4 panels up that will be plenty of power to run their AC unit. And with it being that's all they wanted. Now, if you get up there and you know that your client's going to want to run the whole house and you only see 4 panels up there, you might want to say, hey, just as an FYI, you may want to have a solar company come out, evaluate the size of this because I don't know that it's going to do what you want it to do. And just leave it back to the solar professional on that one. I hope that answered your question. The other things you want to look at are your typical roof penetrations. And this just falls back to our typical roofing inspections. Is it flashed properly? Are the flashings painted? Do we have exposed fasteners? Do we have holes where they tried to fasten it and it didn't work, so they just didn't backfill them? We see all kinds of weird things when it comes to flashing. We want to make sure that we're following the standards for roof penetration inspections. So make sure that you're checking screws, make sure you're checking the flashings, make sure it's not cracked, look for the red flags. That stuff lets water in, which leads to roof rot, which leads to mold, can lead to all kinds of other things. Remember, it's not our job to design the system, but to recognize when something just doesn't look right. Do you recommend charging extra for solar inspections? We can talk about that when we get towards the end, but I do have an answer for that. All right, so that's what we'll see up on top of the roof. Let's talk about what we'll see from the attic. The glorious attic where everybody likes to go. Anybody that's seen my social media, that seems like that's where I just stay. Sorry, I went too far. Oh, no, I didn't. All right, so when we're up in the attic, you're getting a very unique look at how the solar array gets placed to some extent. The way my business partner and I look at it when we're out with people and we're doing parallels in these, if you look in the attic and you can actually see where the solar array is attached, it's not attached properly. When they attach the solar arrays, they will measure out all of your trusses or rafters throughout the attic. They will map that out on the roof. They will then drill pilot holes where they're going to put lag bolts in. They're about 3 to 4 inches long. That's how they mount the brackets. They mount them through the center of your rafter or your truss. And as long as it is done properly, you'll never know that it's there from the attic side. So what are we looking for? When we're going up into the attic and we're looking, What we're wanting to look for is we're wanting to look for pilot holes that have drilled out the side of the truss or next to the truss. We're wanting to see if the lag bolts are busting out the side, if it's been modified, if there's splitting, anything that's like a weird mounting modification that's been done. What we're looking to see is that the structure is intact and it's stable, just like we would any other time that we're in the attic and we're checking trusses. We're actually, since they're actually drilling into it, where there's a higher chance that they're going to damage it. So we got to be more diligent when we're looking to make sure that that didn't happen. So now we're looking on both sides of that truss to make sure they didn't blow out a side. Again, this is a 3 to 4 inch lag bolt that's about 5/16 in diameter. So it can blow out a nice little chunk if they do it wrong. Next thing is the ventilation that's in the attic. So solar installers don't always think about the venting of the attic. They just see, hey, we got to put them up here, and this is what we got. We got 500 square feet to power this entire house, and that O'Hagan vent is in the way, but I'm not worried about it. We're going over it. So you want to watch for that. So you want to watch for panels or raceways that obstruct the vents, the O'Hagan vent, or ridge vents, your O'Hagan vents, or your soffits. There should be at least a 1 inch clearance around any ducting or vents to allow for the attic to breathe. And we all pretty much know why the attic has to breathe. We want to keep down any type of moisture buildup or any type of mold growth in there. So we got to make sure those vents still stay clear. Again, keeping a good space from the surface of the roof to the panel will help keep good clearance from your vents. Now, we've gone to homes where we've actually seen the array sitting right on top of the T vent for the dryer, crushing it. So you want to make sure that you're looking at those and call those out. If you can, look under the solar array when you're up on the roof to make sure that those vents are not getting crushed. When you're in the attic, if you have O'Hagan vents, make sure that you're looking up there. You should be able to see if there's a shadow cast across it, whether you've got the array going over it or not. Just kind of keep that in mind. We really want to be cautious of it here in Arizona, where the attics can really reach cook your dinner levels. So then we've got the electrical components of it. So the electrical components consist of like the raceways, the MC cables, your junction boxes. We want to make sure that everything is securely fastened to your truss system where it needs to be, or to whatever it is that they've got to secure it. You do not want anything running loose on the roof deck. You don't want it too close to your roof deck where it can get damaged when somebody's doing a repair to the roof, unless it's directly under the panel. If it's directly under the panel, that you're pretty much fine there. Your wiring should be protected from any physical damage, not resting on the insulation, and junction boxes should, of course, be covered and secured properly. Not like what you'd normally see in attics where somebody does a flip, they throw a whole bunch of wires into it and just kind of toss it off to the side. They need to be secured and accessible. Some other items to look for are melted wiring, sheathing, scorched junctions, loose splices. If you have loose splices on your raceway, you kind of have to really scratch your head and wonder why, because again, DC current, not really beneficial to your house. So you really wouldn't want to see splices going into it. You want to make sure you're calling all those out, just like we would on any other electrical. Doing these checks is going to ensure that your array does not compromise the structure. It's going to make sure you still have good airflow and that your electrical safety of the home is relevant and intact. So with that, being in the attic, we want to talk about safety. So whenever you go into an attic, you always got to remember that attics can be considered a confined space, especially if your opening to get into it is really small. We all do some shady stuff to get our inspections done, like shady stuff to get up on the roof, shady things to do to get into attics, because we want to make sure that our clients are protected the best possible. We got to remember, stay safe. So they're not glamorous. The attics aren't glamorous, though you do get some good social media content. It gets even more hairy when you start talking about PV systems because the PV system goes all the way down to the soffit. So you're trying to get into some really tight places. You're going to be, dodging rogue nails. You're going to be trying to dodge wires. You're going to try and keep from stepping through your sheetrock and greeting your homeowners with some pretty dramatic fashion. So you want to make sure that you're being safe. Walk on truss members. Walk on the catwalk. Do not try and walk in between them. You're going to fall through. Um, if you are walking on truss members and you're not walking on catwalks, especially here in Arizona, you want to be careful. If you hear it crunching, step back. Termites are a real thing here. They do destroy wood and they will destroy it without you even knowing it. So you can have termites in your attic and not have termites anywhere else in the house and not know it. So stepping on those, I did it just recently where I stepped on a truss and you could actually hear it crunch and we kind of put a little dent in the ceiling. So be safe. PPE is going to be your friend. You go jump into a 1980s attic that's full of dust and all kinds of other stuff. You don't want to be breathing that in. So I know that most of us don't do it when we go inspect an attic, but wear a bump cap or a helmet or a hard hat. Make sure you have eye protection and make sure you're wearing a respirator. Most of us just sat through that and went, okay. But remember, you don't want to jeopardize yourself. There's no reason for you to put your safety at risk to get that inspection done. There are things called limitations, and we'll talk about those. So the next component I want to talk about are the batteries and the inverters. Let's start with the inverter. So if the solar panel is going to be the muscle of the system, the inverter is going to be the brain of it. The inverter is what is going to take that DC power and convert it over to AC power. It's your DC current, your AC current, AC DC. I'll save the dad joke. When you're inspecting this, there's a few common things that you want to check. First, you want to make sure that the inverter is actually running. When you're next to the inverter, you can hear it. It's humming. You'll know that it's running. Your older inverters, that's all you're going to hear is just the hum. On your newer inverters, like the one you see on your screen here, it's going to have a panel on that. That panel is going to tell you what what the wattage is, what your voltage is, and if there's an error. If you happen to see an error code on it, note the error code. That is a call out. You can always Google what the error is as long as you know what the model of it is. I'm going to kind of discourage you from doing that because if you're Googling it, you may or may not get the correct answer. We all know about fake news. Kind of stay away from the Google on that one. If you have the manual, sometimes the manuals are located near the inverter. You can always look up the error codes because they're usually in there. That takes your inspection to another level. You can always report on what that was. Otherwise, just report the error code and call it out that you're recommending a solar company come out and evaluate it. You also want to look at your connections. You'd be surprised at how many loose or corroded wires that you'll actually see on an inverter. Typically, it's just a conduit that runs in, the raceway that runs into it, but sometimes there's wires that connect to it and they do get corroded, they do come loose. So that you'll see those more on your older units. And just like on a smoke detector, how they turn kind of a dingy yellowish color, that's how you can actually look at your inverters. They kind of discolor with their age. So you'll pretty much know when they're aging. Other things you want to do is you want to make sure that it's securely mounted to the wall. It should not be loose. Don't go up there and try and just jerk on it and move it, but kind of push on it a little bit. If it's wiggling, you want to call that out. They need to be securely mounted. You don't need that thing coming loose and falling off the wall. And then probably one of the most important things, you want to make sure it has proper labeling. Missing or unclear labels on your inverter is absolutely a safety issue. You have to make sure it's all labeled. And that's probably going to be one of the bigger safety concerns that we'll have with our solar systems if they're not properly labeled. So we're not really troubleshooting like an electrician, but our job is to make sure that we're spotting the one-offs, the things that look odd with the system. Make sure that we're always following up with recommended licensed contractor evaluate, either electrician or a solar technician. So let's talk about our batteries. When you're inspecting the home with a battery system, it's not our job to really test the battery. Our job is to spot the obvious things with the batteries. Now, there's all kinds of batteries. There's lithium ion, there's the lithium iron, there's the lead cell, there's all kinds. But first thing we want to do is we want to start with the location of the battery. It doesn't really matter what type it is. All the batteries are going to have pretty much the same type of concerns. So we want to start with the locations. The batteries need to be located in a cool, dry, well-ventilated area. These things actually do generate heat. And when you're talking about Arizona, that's saying something. So we want to make sure that they're not enclosed and people will enclose them. Sorry, how often would you recommend the system being inspected? So we recommend the system be inspected at least once a year. Not to get too far off topic from the batteries, but it does play into this. So when you're having the system inspected by your solar company or by an inspection company, you want to have it done once a year. If it's leased, they're going to tell you that they're going to maintain it. You'll never see them. I lived out here for 3 years in a house that had solar. It was leased. Never once saw the solar company, but they maintained it. So you want to make sure that you're having somebody come out and look at it at least once a year. So with the location of the hope that answered your question on that one. So the location of the battery, make sure we're checking that. The next thing is we want to make sure it's securely mounted to the wall or whatever it is that it's supposed to be secured to. Has to be secure. You don't want that thing falling over. It is heavy. Especially if it's like a Tesla Powerwall, which is what is becoming more common now. Make sure that it's firmly attached, there's no gaps in it, and that you have enough space for airflow around it and the tech to get to it. The way it's attached to the wall is typically a big concern. For clearance and access to it, we want to make sure that people aren't building their garage cabinets around them. We see it all the time where they build their garage cabinets and they're covering up all their outlets, and we're having to go try and find them because the GFCI reset's in there and they've got paint stacked in front of it. Well, they do the same thing with their battery backups. They will build their cabinets all the way around it because you can't move the system. It's where it is, it's where it's going to be, but they'll build cabinets around it. Or they'll stack their Christmas items in front of it. They'll stack their bikes in front of it. They'll put their UTV right there where you can't get to it. Make sure that there's clear access to the panel or to the battery system so it can be serviced. It's no different than your electrical panel, nothing 3 feet in front of, keep it clear above, on the sides. Very important that you keep that clear. And finally, you want to make sure that you're looking at all of your wiring and disconnects. The wiring should be clean. It should be protected in conduit. You want to see labels near the shutoff. Again, labels are very important for shutoffs. Very, very important. That there's no exposed wires and no signs of tampering. Those systems are enclosed. They are not designed for you to go and open them up unless it's a cabinet that's designed to hold it. You'll typically not see a way to get into it. So if you see tampering, you definitely want to call it out. You're not there to certify that battery. We're just there to see what looks out of the ordinary. Next part of this is going to be our conductors and our connections. So these are going to be our raceways, our wiring, our junction boxes. So when it comes to inspecting the electrical side of the PV system, a lot of what we're checking comes down to the quality of the install. Is it safe? Is it clean? Is it properly supported? We're not going to be quoting code, even though everything that we're looking at does fall under the NEC. All of this does. That's not any different. We're not going to quote it, but we do use it as a guideline for what feels right, what is right. So let's start with the raceway. These are rigid, flexible conduits they're protecting all the wires. You'll see them on the roof. You're going to see them through the attic. If it's on the roof, you want to make sure they're securely mounted, that they're routed cleanly. Typically, it's going to be along the ridge. It's going to be down the hip, or it might be through a valley. Then you want to make sure that it goes towards the exterior wall in the most direct fashion to get to the inverter. This is going to help keep the installation tidy and minimizes trip hazards for anybody that's having to walk the roof, such as a roofer, the solar technician, or a firefighter who had to go up there and vent the roof for any reason. You want to make sure you're looking for trip hazards. You want to look for roof damage. You're going to look for rust, loose fittings, missing brackets, anything that's out of the ordinary that we would typically call out for electrical or roofing. Those are always worth noting every time. You want to look at your junction boxes. These need to be accessible because we have a bunch of junctions that go into those. You have all of your wires running from your panel underneath. They're going to go to a junction box and then move out from there. So you want to make sure they're all easily accessible. You want to make sure that they're weatherproof if they're outside, and that they are mounted solidly. Again, not loose like they lay in the attic all the time. All wire splices should be inside the box. You should not see any types of wire splices outside of the raceway or outside of the panels. If you see exposed wires, burn marks, open knockouts, missing covers, all of these, just like they would be for a regular electrical inspection, those are signs of poor workmanship or overheating. They need to be called out with a recommendation. For your cables, you will see cables that run underneath your solar array. All of your cables that you see, all your cable runs, they should be clearly marked as solar rated. They are to be secured properly, usually within 12 inches of a box and every 4.5 feet along the run. Again, do not worry about citing any NEC codes. We have no requirement to cite code. We are not code inspectors. Just understand that loose or dangling wires across the roof or the yard is absolutely a problem. You should never see your wires laying on the roof. Your solar panels should never be laying on the roof. Make sure that there's always a gap. Finally, your interior raceways, these are the ones that are in your attic. This PV wiring needs to be secured every 6 feet. You need to make sure it's kept off of the insulation. So if you see it laying on insulation, that's a call out. And you got to make sure that it's not obstructing any vents. Now the raceway is only 3/4 inch pipe or conduit, so chance of it actually blocking a vent are pretty slim, but you don't want it in front of the vent. If it's within reach of a walking area, it needs to be protected for sure. And then here's the big one. Most places don't allow your raceway or your MC cable within 10 inches of roof sheathing, unless it's directly underneath the panel array. So if it's within 10 inches of the roof, any types of repairs runs the risk of causing damage if it gets struck. If it's underneath the array, the chances are pretty slim that you're going to have a repair right there that's going to cause damage. So with that, let's talk about how your service panel gets powered. We're going to look at something called the 120% rule. Real quick, this can be answered at the end, but if your solar is leased, what is the solar company responsible for when it comes to maintenance? You definitely will talk about that one at the end. That's a great one. Go ahead and just make sure that stays up there so I get it answered. So let's talk about the 120% rule. So this one can be confusing to anybody, but it's a pretty simple formula. This is how we're going to determine how much power can go from the grid and from your array into your panel. So When setting up the PV system, the amount of power that can be added to your service panel is actually determined by the 120% rule. This is an NEC thing. This ensures that the combined amperage of the main service breaker and your PV breaker do not exceed 120% of the panel's bus bar rating. So those of you that are kind of new to home inspection, we always say, take a picture of the label. Well, the label actually tells us a whole bunch of things. But for this standpoint, or for this right here, what we're looking for is the bus rating. So if you look at the bus picture there, the rating of the bus bar there, it says the bus rating on this one is 225 amps. We can take that bus bar up to 120% of that rating. So the way we would do that is you're going to take your 225 max rating, multiply it times 1.2, and that tells us that we can put a maximum of 270 amps into that bus safely. The way we're going to do that is through this formula. You're going to take your maximum panel rating, in this case it was 225 amps, and we're going to use your main disconnect, which we're saying is going to be 200 amps. We develop our 120%, which is 270. We're then going to subtract our main disconnect, 200 amps, from the 270, which is going to leave us with, simple math, 70 amps. So that tells us that our solar array can have a maximum overcurrent protection of 70 amps. So a 70 amp disconnect is what we can see in the panel. So that's actually a relatively large array. That would probably power a whole house. So that's how we determine what we can put into the panel. Now, what do we do if we go to a panel and we say, it says that, we have a 200 amp max bus and a 200 amp disconnect. We can only have a 40 amp disconnect in there, but we've got a 65. Well, how do we fix that? The way we fix that is through redistributing the power. It's also called derating the main breaker. So what we're going to do is we're then going to use our 120% rule, and we're going to derate that main breaker down to something that will allow that 65 amp breaker to be acceptable in that panel. So what we would want to do is then derate it, the main breaker, down to 175 amps. So when we do that, that gives us an extra 25 amp headroom, allowing us to have that 65 amp breaker in that panel for that solar array, which keeps us within that 120% rule. It is not uncommon to go to these older systems and see a 200 amp panel, which is very common, with a 200 amp disconnect, which is very common, and have a 60 amp disconnect for your solar panel. I can almost guarantee you that when you look at it, you're going to see that main bus is going to be discolored. The reason why is because we've pumped too much power to it. It has gotten hot, maybe not too hot, but it has gotten hot and it starts to discolor. It'll turn orange, gold, purple. Once it hits purple, we've really got a problem. So that is something that you want to look for. This right here can make you look like an inspection hero. Throw on your cape, you're a hero, because you've now spotted something that is a pretty significant issue. You can void the warranty of the solar array. You can overheat your panel for risk of unsafe conditions for those that are operating the panel to get in when they get into it, or even a fire hazard. So these are things that we want to make sure we're looking at. This is a big one. So some common problems that you might see are, especially here in Arizona, the panels bake in the sun. They heat up, that label disappears, as you can see here in this panel. This was an inspection I did probably about 3 weeks ago. The label is just gone. Our disconnect on there is a 175 amp disconnect, and our solar array there was a 45 amp disconnect. Now, basic math that we just looked at, we know that that's probably underrated for the panel. So we probably could go a little bit larger, but we don't know. And the reason why we don't know is because we don't have a label. So we want to make sure that we're looking for that. Make sure that there's a label. If you don't see the label, that is an absolute call out. You want to make sure that an electrician comes out, rates the panel, and make sure that we have the right size breaker. They might still need to derate that breaker further. I would hope not, because under 75 is pretty low for our modern homes, but that is a chance. Other things we want to look for are overheating breakers because the panels do get hot. These panels can get up to upwards of 170, 175 degrees. The breakers in there, they do bake. You'll see that with your AFCI, GFCI breakers. They have a tendency of failing, especially when they bake in the sun. You'll also want to make sure that you're documenting any conditions with the panel that you normally would. So if you're doing a solar inspection only, you get called out, hey, can you do this solar array inspection for me? I need to have a warranty and review on it. Yeah, we can do that. You're going to do an inspection on that panel just as you would any other panel at any other time on any other inspection. So you want to make sure that you're going through it and doing your standard electrical inspection for that panel. Remember, you're not citing code on this. You're always going to recommend a licensed electrical contractor for the panel. Not verifying code, just what's potentially wrong. So with that, let's talk about bonding and grounding. I'm not going to beat you guys up with bonding and grounding, but let's talk about it briefly. You don't have to be a code expert when it comes to grounding, but you do need to recognize some things that just don't look right. Some of the common things that you'll see are missing or loose grounding lugs. Sometimes you'll just see the wire wrapped around the gas pipe or the water pipe. There's no lug; it's just wrapped there. You want to make sure that if it's loose or missing, you want to call that out. It's usually when you're looking at the PV system, the grounding system is usually attached to the racking system. So where the whole frame of the array where the modules sit, you'll see the ground attached to it. If you have a series of arrays like you see here, that's a series of 3 arrays. Those will all be attached by a grounding or a bonding wire. There'll be a ground and a bond for each one. You want to look for corrosion, damage to the ground wires. Sometimes you'll see the ground wire goes directly to the ground. It doesn't actually go to the panel. It's very rare that you'll see that, but it does occur. If you see a bond wire going from panel to panel or module to module, you want to make sure that, or if you see gaps in them, you want to make sure there's no rubber grommets in there because sometimes they do that for spacing. If you do see the rubber grommets, you want to see that bond wire go from one side to the other, just like we would if we were looking at a water filtration system. You want to see the bond wire jumping from copper line to copper line because that plastic doesn't conduct electricity. The other things you want to look for are DIY specials, electrical tape, duct tape. You want to make sure that they're not using wire clamps to hold the bonding wire on. It's got to be electrically related or rated. I'm sorry. Again, you're not verifying the electrical integrity of this. You're looking for red flags. That's pretty much all we're doing when it comes to the PV system. We're looking for the red flags. So let's talk about our overcurrent protection and disconnects. These are pretty important. So if you talk to any electrician, they're going to tell you that this is a very redundant system with all of the disconnects. You got 3 common disconnects. You have your DC disconnect. So you have the power comes in from the array, it hits a DC disconnect, then goes to your inverter. From the inverter, it then goes out to your net metering, and then it has a disconnect, and then it goes to your surface panel. So there's 2 disconnects right there. Then you're going to have another disconnect that's going to happen inside your panel, which is clearly labeled, and it's just a breaker. That's your 3rd disconnect. Some systems are actually going to have a rapid disconnect, which would be a fourth kind. And that one's actually at the bottom of your inverter. The graphic over here shows the rapid shutdown off to the side. You do find them like that, but typically it's going to be at the base of your inverter and it'll say rapid disconnect. All of these should be clearly labeled. They need to be accessible and they need to be securely mounted. If they are not, if they're missing a label, they're buried behind a water heater, or you're unable to access it, that's a major safety concern. You have to be able to get to these disconnects. All of these disconnects are for you, I'm not you, but the homeowner. They're for safety personnel that have to access the home in case there is, say, a fire or a flood or something like that. So in addition to that, now you're also going to check for your common overcurrent protection devices. These are your breakers and fuses and things like that you'll see in your panel. You want to make sure that they're properly sized. We just talked about that with the 120% rule. That's pretty important. You want to make sure that the panels are not overcrowded. You're going to see that where they've taken your breakers. They're throwing in the breakers, the dual breakers. They're just jamming them in the tandem breakers. They're jamming them into the box to try and get as many wires in there as they possibly can. You see it very commonly on old homes. Where there's no more room left in there. Someone's just squeezed it all in, and now they got to try and force in all the solar panel stuff. That's going to create heat, and that's going to create issues with the system. The other things you want to look for is your overcurrent protection device that's labeled in the panel. This is pretty important, and you need to make sure that you see it. This is a life safety thing for emergency personnel. They need to be able to open that panel and flip that switch and shut down that panel quick. It is also considered a rapid shutdown. So again, we're not recalculating the amps or anything like that. We're looking to document any types of issues inside of that panel and follow up with a licensed electrician or a solar technician. And almost all solar companies will have an electrician on staff, if not one more. These are the common labels that you're going to find on your disconnects. Right here, the one over here, the photovoltaic DC disconnect is going to have a list of the operating voltage, the current, the max voltage, and so on. But these will be the common labels that you're going to find on your disconnects. So with that, let's talk about your signs and your labels. Here's just the basic signs that you're going to see. All of your labels need to, this falls under the NEC. You need to make sure that they are clearly identified for safety, maintenance, and emergency response. All of your DC disconnects must be labeled with their function. They need to be permanent, they need to be weather resistant, and they need to be clearly visible. For your raceways, your cable trays, your enclosures, all of your conduit, they need to have a warning on that says warning, photovoltaic power source. They need to be labeled every 10 feet minimum. Or at a maximum. They need to be at every turn, every bend, and at every wall penetration. They need to be on both ends of the array, and the lettering has to be 3/8 of an inch high and in all capital letters. The lettering has to be white reflective text, and it has to be on a red background. When you go to inspect these, they're going to be faded, they're going to be broken, they're going to be all over the place. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to those, and we are calling them out. Your DC disconnects and combiner boxes, those are going to have your maximum voltage, your maximum current, your short circuit current, system grounding method if it's applicable. Your AC output connection, that's typically in the service panel. That one is going to be specific. It's going to say warning. inverter output connection, do not relocate overcurrent device. That's the one that's located in the bottom right of your electrical panel. And that's the standard, that's where they put it. If you see it someplace else, you may want to question who put it in the system. And then if you have a rapid shutdown, it's going to say rapid PV system equipped with rapid shutdown right next to the rapid shutdown, and it's usually just a dial each turn. So let's look at some required signage. This is what you're going to see most. This is what it looks like on the raceway. Again, maximum 10 feet apart at every bend on both sides, at every turn, at every penetration, also at any connections. For the interior of the panel, this is the one that you're going to see. This is the close-up of the one we had just saw. It says, warning, inverter output connection, do not relocate this current device. This must be in there and it must be permanently affixed. If you do not see it, that is a safety concern, that is a call out. That is also going to be how we determine the 120% rule. We have to know that that is truly for the solar. So let's look at our common conditions and reporting. So this is what kind of the big reason why we're here. So we want to look at some common issues that we might see, some things that we need to look for. So when we're looking at the system in the field, we want to look at shading. As I told you, I live at the base of a mountain. We lose about 3 hours of sunlight. We get a lot of shade here. We want to make sure that you're looking at the system from afar, getting a big picture view of it. Do we see shading issues? It doesn't matter how much the shade is. It can be a vent pipe. It can be a branch from a tree. It could be the parapet wall on a flat roof. It can be pretty much anything. That will drop the energy output of that entire array depending on the type of array system, which we did not discuss because that's a much bigger concern. Just know that no matter what type of system it is, if there's a shadow on it, it is going to cut down that energy output. Installers don't always take that into account. So it's up to us to look at. Sometimes your neighbor's trees just grow too tall, especially here in Arizona where we get mesquite trees and Palo Verde trees that grow like weeds, and overnight you've got 5 inches of tree growth. So we need to look at those and kind of think ahead. Is this going to cause a problem? And make sure that our buyers understand that. We want to look for improper installation. So things can really go sideways with the way people install if it's not done properly. You want to make sure that you're looking for anything that's like loose or exposed wires, missing mounting hardware, penetrations that aren't sealed properly. These aren't just aesthetic issues. These can lead to water intrusion, shorts, fire hazards, all kinds of things with the solar system. As inspectors, we're not judging the installer's work. We're not saying, ooh, this guy did a terrible job. We're looking at it and saying, hey, this was probably not installed up to the best standards. Maybe we need to get it reviewed. A lot of these things can lead to, bigger conditions that will cost the buyer in the long run. And we want to make sure we're preventing that. Then you have your normal wear and tear on the PV system. So we want to look for, the PV systems live outside under the sun, especially here in Arizona. It gets pretty hot and can be pretty brutal. So we want to look for delamination, which looks like just weird discoloration in the panel where you'll see dark spots and light spots. Faded or missing labels, cracked conduit, corrosion around the frames and fasteners. We want to look for those types of things. These are normal signs of aging, but they are all worth calling out. They need to be reported, especially if it's a leased system. We don't always know that in advance, so always walk into these inspections as thinking that it's leased. Typically, it's most common that they are leased. So look at it as a leased system, so we want to call those out so that leasing company can come out and correct these issues. Doing that will take these small issues, prevent them from becoming big issues. Some other things we want to look at, we want to identify some common conditions. So we want to look at maybe impact concerns, meaning things hitting it like hail, tree limbs, golf balls, if we live on a golf course. Birds, you'd be surprised at how many birds fly into solar panels. The solar array that you see there in the top graphic, that's an impact from a bird. Birds, for whatever reason, on these older systems thought it looked like water and they would do little kamikaze dives right into it. We'll save the morbid jokes on that one. But those impacts can turn into cause micro cracks, which can cause bigger issues where when they spread, they cause hot spots. Those will overheat, cuts down efficiency, can actually, in the long run, cause fires. Then we have hotspots. These are like solar panel versions of a fever. You have this one little spot that turns just hot. That's damage that's happened to that one cell in that panel. It could have been damaged, or it could have been anything. Could have been mishandled when they put it up. It'll cause those areas to overheat, and that makes the panel work harder to compensate for that one spot. This can lead to energy loss, premature degradation, and in rare cases, it can cause a fire. You can see panels, you can go on the internet and you can see them where panels have just collapsed from the heat and the fire. You might sometimes see burn marks, you'll see warping of the panel. These are also always best caught with thermal imaging. Now, I know there's a school of thought by some inspectors that, I'm not going to carry a thermal because it increases my liability, because if I use it here but I don't use it over there, I can be liable for not using it here if there was an issue. Totally up to you on whether you want to, but your thermal imaging is going to tell you for sure if there's a hot spot. And when you're using thermal, you will know when there's a hot spot. It's clearly defined. It looks like the cell or these cells, and they're hard lined, that it's a hot spot. When you're looking at those, you definitely want to call those out. And then lastly, we have micro cracks. They're also called snail trails. Snail trails are visible discoloration patterns. Again, they're micro cracks, and they do kind of work their way through the panel. And that's exactly how they look. They look like snail trails. The team was out doing solar training the other day, and we happened to look at a couple of panels, and there was two cells, one on two separate panels, and that had little micro cracked snail trails. We put the thermal imaging over it, and sure enough, those were hot. They're an early warning sign of cell degradation. The cells still function, but they're not going to operate at optimal energy output. So we definitely want to call those out to the homeowner so they can work on it through the Benzer or through the warranty company on the solar array. So let's talk about documenting this stuff. So the importance of documenting, whether it's a cracked panel or a missing label or just limited access to the attic, you want to make sure that you're documenting everything. Everything that you see or that you cannot see, you want to document it. Notes and photos don't just help the client, they protect you also. They are your CYA. If there's ever a warranty issue or a dispute down the road, your report becomes the receipt of what was visible and documented that day. So think of it as insurance for your reputation. So let's talk about how we write the call outs. You want to make sure that the language is clear. Type, condition, and recommendation. Don't go in there and try and sound like an electrical engineer or a solar contractor with the big fancy $50 words. Keep it plain, keep it easy. You're probably not speaking to an engineer, though you might from time to time. I've done it a few times. Keep it simple. It's going to only benefit you in the long run. The simpler, the better. So if you're tossing around big terms, you're going to confuse or you're going to lose your client. It's going to overwhelm them. So you want to speak like you're explaining it to your friend, to your spouse, to whomever, to your child, whatever you're doing. Explain it to to your audience. Know your audience. Your job is to inform, not impress them. And finally, you want to use your visual aids. A well-placed photo with a simple annotation can do more than a very long, well-worded paragraph. Pictures speak 1,000 words. So use your phone, use your tablet, use your iPad. Those pictures are going to instantly help your client see what you were seeing and understand your explanation. Very important that you have those. I know here in Arizona, there's no requirement whatsoever for you to put a picture inside of a report. I recommend it. Put them in there. It helps. It saves a lot of questions. So reporting best practices, you want to make sure that you set yourself apart. Make sure that you are stating your limitations, your maintenance suggestions, and improvement recommendations. Those three things right there are going to set you apart when it comes to your inspection reporting. With your limitations, if you cannot access it, if you cannot see it, and you know that you should, limit it. Make sure that you put a limitation in there. I could not get to the truss system at the soffit level. I wasn't skinny enough. However you want to word it, make sure that you put the limitation in there. Because if something happens down the road, you need to make sure that you told them why you could not get to that portion of the system. It's easier to tell them in the document than try and explain it 6 months down the road when all of a sudden they've got a leak somewhere because the solar array started leaking. Next, you want to offer some basic maintenance tips. We're not solar techs, but a few good nuggets along the way it's going to go a long way. So you want to let them know, periodically get your solar panels cleaned, have it inspected once a year. Tell them to keep an eye out for any type of shading issues. Make sure that you give them some good advice for the future. What's going to help them maintain that solar panel down the road? And finally, what we want to make sure we do is we want to offer improvement suggestions. We're not talking about repairs, we're talking about improvement. So we want to talk about things like adding critter guard to keep pigeons out from underneath it, roof rats out from underneath it. Make sure we talk about maybe surge protectors to protect against lightning strikes or grid surges. Anything that might improve your system. If they got a standard solar system that puts energy back out to the grid, but they were talking about when they walked into the house, living off the grid, hey, you may want to think about getting a battery system. You're not talking about repairs, you're talking about improvements. So those things right there are going to set you apart from your competition. And guys, that's pretty much what I have when it comes to the solar inspection. Basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to add more value to your inspection. As home inspectors, we are wanting to always grow. Home inspection has been around since the 80s. I know we've all heard this, but it's been around since the 80s. We charge the same. We really, we don't do much, much different than what we did in the 80s, but we do. We've got better technology. We've got more tools. We're doing more things. More things are coming up in the homes. Homes are getting smarter, and we have to adapt to that. And this is one of those. So we need to look at that, add value. When we add value, we need to add pricing. There was a question, do you recommend charging more for doing a solar inspection? Yes, I do. I do recommend that because you're adding more time to it. You're adding more expertise to it. You're going out there, you're getting more educated. You sat through my boring 1-hour presentation on how to do a solar inspection. So yes, add it. Make sure you do a price comparison around the market. Don't try and outprice your competition, but again, don't sell yourself short. We've been doing inspections for however long we've been doing them, and we know what our value is. Price for your value. Let's look at a couple of these questions. So Zachary asked, how often would you recommend the system being inspected? Once a year. You definitely, it's just like your water heater or your roof. Have somebody go up there and inspect it once a year. That's pretty important because energy efficiency doesn't last forever. Solar panels have a lifespan of about 20 years. So you want to have them inspected annually. Lydia asked, this can be answered in, if it's leased, what is the solar company responsible for? Well, that's very specific to the solar company. So you want to make sure that you're reaching out to the manufacturer of the solar company or the people that have it. Like out here, Solar City went out of business, Tesla bought them. So you want to reach out to Tesla. Ask them about the warranty on it. What do they cover? Some will cover everything, some will cover just basic maintenance of it, and then you're responsible for a portion of it. But that's something very specific, so you want to reach out to your solar company for that one. Daniel, hey Joe, do you have a template for solar? Good info, we need to protect our clients. Yes, I do have that. I will give you my contact information. Actually, you can see it right there on the screen. Give me an email, or you can shoot me a text to that phone number. I'll be glad to get with you, and we can talk about that template. Lydia, how often should solar arrays be cleaned, and if your clients want to clean them? Great question. Yes, solar needs to be cleaned. So with the solar arrays, anything that gets on top of them or covers them will cut down their energy output. So you definitely want to get them cleaned. Out here in Arizona, we have monsoon season where dust is blowing and the rain is hitting and then turns to mud, and then that mud sticks to your solar array. So right around about the September timeframe, you're probably going to want to have somebody get up there and start cleaning it. Now, I'm not going to encourage you as Mr. Homeowner to go out there and climb up on your roof and clean your solar panels. I'm going to recommend that a qualified technician go out and clean the solar array. Now, if you are brave and you want to do that, that is totally up to you, Mr. Homeowner. That's how I would explain it to them. Everybody knows what their comfort level is with heights. I know that my best friend, he was having a house built, and his guy that was going up to fix the roof said, hey, I'm comfortable with heights. He got up there and froze and was up there for 3 hours. So everybody thinks they're good until they're there. So leave it up to the homeowner, but always recommend a qualified professional do it. And it should be at least once a year. Annual inspection is definitely after storm weather events. Absolutely, Peter, you're totally correct on that. Tim, no question, just conclusion. While I found the info useful, pass on added service, this too much liability. Thank you for the info. It is a lot of liability. You are absolutely correct. Everything that we do is riddled with liability. That's why we have our limitations. That's why we have our standards. We've got to make sure that we fall within our standards. And you know, that level of liability risk, it falls upon the inspection company or that inspector as to what they would want to do. Totally respect that though. All right, do we have any other questions? I hope this was very useful for you. If you need to get a hold of me, you can reach me at 480-353-0668. That's my number. You can reach me by email at joe@inspectwithpremier.com here in Phoenix. And let's see here, Peter, I am late to the webinar. Do you you have an inspection agreement? Yes, we do have an inspection agreement. Again, just like the previous, you can shoot me an email and I'd be glad to reach out to you about that. All right, if nobody else has anything, that's what I've got. Stop sharing on the screen. All right, thanks guys, I appreciate it. Other than that, have a great day and hope to hear from you.